Okay, we should be having first dog on the moon, 24th of April,
We
2016.
plod through these weeks until July.
It just keeps going. It's a gift that keeps going.
Thanks to Candy Bowers, writer performer. In the MTC, if you're in Melbourne, Straight White Men is the show. Fatima Mishan with us as well, a columnist. Beautiful piece in the most recent edition of The Engine. I can recommend to you. Chris Berg, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs. It's almost 6 minutes to 10. Hello, Patriots, and welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm the Walkley Award-winning editorial cartoonist for The Guardian Australia, First Dog on the Moon. Listen to that. I love the smell of democracy in the morning. You know what that sound is, Patriots? That's the 2016 federal election campaign getting underway. Glorious. Oh, sure, it's not official yet, but we all know the election is on like a giant mechanical scone. And yet, Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, what's he doing? He seems woefully unprepared. Although, to be fair, the poor fellow's only been in Parliament 12 years and only 6 of those in government, so maybe we should cut him some slack. Meanwhile, opposition leader Boo Pistol is actually getting some traction in the polls. Well, not him, but his party of gormless shills and career grifters. What's different about Blob now is that he has a few of these newfangled things he calls policies, which are apparently the result of having ideas. I'm sure there's a topical cream he can put on it. So, what are the key issues that will decide this election for everyday decent Australians like yourselves? We've assembled an expert panel of experts from across the political spectrum. Joining us today is Franklin Munt from the Institute for Public Affairs. Oh, hello. And Pancetta Mandibles from the IPA. Good evening. Thank you both. I think the first issue which voters will be thinking about as they head into the nation's polling booths on July 2 is whether we should sell Tasmania to New Zealand for $1.
Oh, absolutely.
Gwendolyn? Well, is it actually worth that much? I mean, what does it even do? Quite possibly, Gwendolyn, quite possibly. Well, all right, what about the Banking Royal Commission? Surely we no longer need it. The voters are bound to be happy with Scott Morrison's response, which is that the government, made up of former bankers who take generous donations from the banks, are making key changes to ASIC to address all the issues inflicted upon the nation by the next generation of parliamentarians who are still working in the banking sector. I can't see a problem with that. Franklin?
Masterstroke by Malcolm Turnbull. He completely neutralised the issue for people who would have voted for him anyway.
Pancetta. Only the most churlish and intemperate voters would consider the amoral, corrupt behaviour of the banks a reason to not vote for Prime Minister Turnbull. And how about the issue of tax reform? Oh, well, no thanks, I'm trying to give it up. All right, how about the Senate inquiry into political donation fraud and what Arthur Sinodinos knew and when he forgot it, even though he was Treasurer of the Liberal Party at the time?
Another non-issue. It's typical of the class warfare that the mainstream media engage in.
Well, that's fair enough, too. Okay, what do voters think about how Barnaby Joyce was Prime Minister for a day recently? Will the fact that he only speaks in gibberish be an obstacle for the government? Pancetta, let me just say this. Barnaby Joyce, who is a great Australian of the sort of person in the wonderful state of New South Wales, but formerly of Queensland, isn't he? It's important to remember that it's ultimately up to the voters of New England, even though he drove that four-wheel drive into a creek, but mainly people who grow the vegetables and cows are his primary concern. Don't lick a cane toad. Cogent analysis, Pancetta. Well, here's an interesting one. Sophie Mirabella has categorically denied pushing Cathy McGowan out of the way at the opening of a nursing home, yet interestingly, she remains silent on the question of whether she eats live kittens for breakfast. And that's all we've got time for. Remember, Australia, on July 2, vote early, vote often. This has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living, brought to you by the First Dog on the Moon Institute. You're welcome.
Yeah, well, it's been one of those weeks. It has been one of those weeks. The big interesting bit was that all the people who were in Paris discussing global warming and how to limit it and what to do about anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, they all went back and actually signed the bit of paper that they said they were going to sign. And when they were having their original discussions, the Paris Climate Accords or whatever they called it, they said that they were going to do their absolute utmost level best to hold global warming to 1.5 degrees above the global average temperature as measured from 1950 to 1980, which is what they're using as their baseline, that particular 30-year stretch, because although technically, yes, you could say that the heat pulse of global warming had been detected before 1950, and it's since 1980 that things have really started to change, but that 30 years is considered the baseline. The trouble is, the last 14 of the 15 or 16 years, each year's been successively the hottest year on record. In 2016, I haven't heard very recent figures, but I do know that January globally was the hottest January on record ever, 1.28 or something degrees above that 30-year baseline. February was the hottest February on record ever in the history of Februaries. And it was 1.35 degrees above the average February temperature. So not only is it hotter than ever been before, it was hotter than last month, sort of thing. So we are currently tracking along what 10 or 15 years ago any mainstream qualified climate scientist would have assured us was a completely alarmist worst case scenario or situation. About the only sort of explanation I can really come up with for it is that 15 to 20 years ago there were lots of pictures getting around. That windmill's hooting along at the moment, and I'm doing about 600 revs a minute. There were pictures getting around of methane gas bubbling up from the ocean floor all along the northern coast of Europe and Scandinavia. There were also pictures of what used to be permafrost all over northern Canada and Siberia, and the permafrost was going soggy, and when it goes soggy, all of the dead organic matter that froze in there when the last ice age hit, it suddenly thaws out like a surfacing mammoth, and it goes rotten, and when it goes rotten it vents methane, and methane is a whole lot worse than carbon dioxide. And there was talk at the time, 15 or 20 years ago, that maybe the fact that the methane clathrates and the permafrost are giving up the gas, maybe that means that we've hit a tipping point and things are not going to be even remotely linear, they're going to go exponential. So we might be in for 7 degrees of global warming by 2100. That could be a conservative estimate. Bloody scary if it is. I can remember when I first started paying attention to this, they were saying that sea level was going up about a centimetre every 10 years. Now it's going up about a centimetre every 3 or 4 years. So not only is sea level rising, it's rising at an increasing rate. The prediction is that the small side of Antarctica, that's good for 20 metres worth of sea level rise. Greenland's good for 20 metres worth of sea level rise, and the big half of Antarctica, that's that could be good for another 60 or 80 metres of sea level rise. We could be looking at a total of 120 metres of sea level rise if we melt all the ice that we've still got left. Another really interesting point that I read in the New Scientist magazine was that we've melted enough ice and put it into the ocean and taken it off the land that we've actually changed the dynamic balance of planet Earth. And whereas the axis of the Earth, the rotational axis of the Earth, was moving west, looked at from the northern hemisphere, it is now moving east. We've changed the direction that the planet's axis is wobbling. Now that could do all sorts of curious things to tectonic plates. It could destabilise a few earthquake zones. We could get some increased volcanism. We really don't know. I mean, the last time carbon dioxide levels were as high as they are right now was 11 million years ago, 403 parts per million. And we've still got lunatics like everybody in the Liberal Party and everybody in the Labor Party and everybody in the National Party and pretty much most of the independents who are all seriously still planning on licensing more coal mines. In Australia, 93% of the barrier reef is bleached, dead, white, gone. Yeah, we fucked that with the El Nino this year. Biggest El Nino we've ever had too. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Freshwater lakes, they're disappearing. The Taswegians, they're out of water for their hydro system because they ran all their hydroelectric dams through the turbines already and they've got no more water to make electricity with. They used to have an undersea cable, but I think it's still going to be out of whack for about another month because they thought the cable was a bit leaky. They went out with a repair crew to try and fix it. When they cut the cable to fix the cable, that let more water get into the cut cable. Surprise, surprise. So they thought that was going to take a month or 6 weeks. I wonder how long before Tasmania is in the same situation as Venezuela. Venezuela's also pretty much completely hydroelectric powered. They export oil, they got mountains and they used to have rain. Venezuela's now running on a 3-day working week because they don't have enough electricities to run their factory or their business or their bank or their shop or their... No, just haven't got enough of it, fellas, you know. Go back to working 3 days a week, dig vegetables, you know, start growing food. Can't guarantee your refrigerator's going to have mains power. So things are starting to unravel pretty quick, and Australia's kidding itself over whether or not they're going to have an election, when they're going to have an election, whether we're in caretaker mode. We did dispatch another 300 Keen Green troopers to the muddled east to go and live in Iraq 2 days ago, I think. And of course, as soon as we send another 300 over there, we get a press release from the Australian Defence Force spokesman announcing that in Iraq, ISIL is preparing to withdraw from some areas and therefore they are planting booby traps and IEDs on an industrial scale. And their theory is that 300 Australians and 150 Kiwis are going to teach the Iraqis how to shoot straight, and if they can just do that, if they can get them to hit what they're pointing at when they pull the trigger, then that'll be the end of the Islamic State in the Levant. The caliphate will disappear if the Australians teach rifle range skills to Iraqis. What none of those prawns have got through their heads yet is that as soon as you put them in battle, they decide that the caliphate's corrupt government is better than the corrupt puppets that the Western world has put over their heads for the past 150, 200 years, you know, like pretty much since Napoleon's invasion of Egypt. So it's been an interesting little week. There's no clear sense of direction apart from the fact that everybody wants to continue to grow the economy, and you can't have any economic activity unless there's an environmental surplus to be harvested, and 10,300 years since harvest everythingism started at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, we have harvested everything. And it doesn't matter how many chainsaw factories you've got, if there's no bloody forest, your chainsaw factories are fucking useless. That's probably why my still was made of German parts and assembled in Brazil, because the Germans had chainsaw factories and the Brazilians had trees. Infinite transferability of assets and resources, apparently. Warble's on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.